Okay, it's just after 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, November 12th. I'd like to call the Newfound Area School Board meeting to order. If we could, would you all stand so we can salute the flag, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Superintendent Buckley, if you could verify the notice of the posting of the meeting, please.
The meeting has been posted on all appropriate locations, including the SAU office, the website, the schools, and it was sent to the town offices.
Okay, thank you. We do not have a non-public session scheduled this evening, and none is anticipated. And I ask if there are any changes or modifications desired to the agenda this evening, or if it should be approved as presented. Seeing no modifications, we'll assume that it's approved as presented. Move on to item 5, which is intercommunications. I would ask Heather this evening to print her name in town and sign in for a record of attendance. And for anyone else watching that would like to see the school board packet information, if you send an email to scross@sau4.org, you may get the identical packet that we do by email. At this point in time, we are now down to 5C on our agenda, which is public comment. I don't see any elected officials in attendance as yet, although we do expect our budget committee chair to arrive. And therefore, we'll move on to Heather, if you have anything to share with us. No? Okay. No other public comment. Turn it over to Mimi at this point, if you have anything to share with the board.
Actually, someone sent me an email tonight to talk about a drama production that's going to be happening at the middle school, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the name of the production, so I wasn't even going to say anything. But it sounds like it's going to be quite the production. One of our amazing paraprofessionals has been working on it, and he has donated quite a bit of. He and his family have donated a lot of amazing stuff. They microphones, wireless microphones, things that will stay there for the future. Very expensive materials. He's gotten stuff from his family, so it's just really amazing what some people can do with their time that are willing to do it. The paraprofessional is Stephen Miller, who is awesome.
Pirates, something about pirates.
It's something about pirates, yes, but I can't remember the name of it, because I have a whole list of things that different people in his family have donated, and some of the staff as well. So it sounds like it's going to be quite the production.
Do you know when that is?
I don't, but have you got it?
December.
While she's looking, I'd also like to say that, amazingly enough, the year is almost a third over. And I have no idea how that happened. But the first trimester it's ending in
December
2 weeks. December 4th. Yes, I did know that, December 4th.
December 4th.
Yeah.
And the high school is November 22nd and 23rd. Crazy Town.
That's another one, yeah.
So, a lot of good stuff going on.
It's Pirates the Musical.
Thank you.
That was simple, right?
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay. Keegan is not with us this evening, so we'll move on. To a review of the school board minutes that are in blue in the packet. You have two sets, the meeting of October 15th and the meeting of October 28th. Does anyone have corrections? Don?
15th, number 10, public comment. Near the bottom, if someone with extreme special moved in, it should be special needs, moved in, what would we do?
Where, would you?
It's
would you-
box 10 on page 4.
Yeah. The third line from the bottom.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And on number 12E,
Oh, but then, 'cause it's
the minority votes were not listed.
because it's attached to the budget committee. It's the budget committee.
I know Lloyd and I voted against this. I don't know who, were you the third one, Paul?
Yes. I was.
You're, yep.
Get that, Leah?
Oh, that's right. I was reading it the
It
other way.
should read Hebron,
No.
Brooksville, Bridgewater.
I voted for it, and Lloyd voted for it.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
then,
I had it backwards.
And I voted for it.
minority votes.
So I think it was you, Sue, and Jeff were the minority.
I voted against it.
How can there be a minority tie vote?
Yeah.
Well,
It's the no.
the opposition, opposition vote should be recorded. And it lost.
So that was Vincent, Sue, and
Jeff.
Jeff.
Yeah, right. So Groton, Bridgewater, and Alexandria.
What are we talking about?
Item 12E.
The 10 cent.
The second motion.
Increased
Lunch
by 10
increase.
cents.
Any other corrections? Any other minutes?
Oh, I think I had a couple of things.
Sue?
Back to 10, number 10, the box number 10 on page 4. If, the second line, if a teacher has to deal with behavior, they kids will either act out, I think, I don't know if that means the other kids, or will either act out or will need to sit there and wait. So I'm assuming that's the other children? I don't know. Just didn't read.
I think it should say the kids.
Maybe
opposed to
just
they.
the kids. Yeah, could be.
And Heather's from Bristol, so the first line's wrong.
Oh,
Yeah, the kids.
I moved her.
Changing towns.
What else, Sue?
I'm looking. No, nothing else on that one.
Okay, hearing no other corrections on the minutes for October 15th, is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Moved by Paul, is it seconded?
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. Okay, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, any abstentions?
Abstention.
Okay, so we have 5 yes, 0 no, 1 abstention, that being Danbury. And this evening, Lloyd Belbin is excused due to illness. Okay, any corrections to October 28th? Hearing none, if there is a motion to approve.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm out of order.
Even though I wasn't here, I have a couple questions.
Question on the minutes from Dawn.
6A, there's, second bullet, there is anticipated 126,000 offset to health insurance due to health premium reimbursement. That's against this current ongoing budget right now. So does that need to be added to the current budget?
To the
It's-
current budget proposal?
No, the current budget.
No, it's an offset actually for next year.
Okay.
So we've actually readjusted the budget, including that in there.
So then it should say for
For 2014.
For 2000.
15 budget proposal.
budget proposal.
Do you have any corrections,
Okay,
Dawn?
The trustees, oh, here it is. More of a question on the trustee, the next bullet. Did the state indicate how many trustees are needed for that trust fund?
I didn't ask that question, actually, because often the town that the district resides in has trustees of the trust.
Yeah.
So they didn't specify the number of trustees, they just said it would have to be.
But because, you know, I know Hebron has 3 trustees
Right.
for our trust funds. But because this is multi-town,
Right.
we're gonna have to make some kind of,
She said because it's a multi-town, it doesn't matter which town wants to become the trustees for it.
Yeah.
Typically, it's been the town that SAU resides in, but that
Or the-
doesn't matter, because even the town might say, we don't want to do it, and then maybe one of the other towns could do it. The representative who we work with the DRA, she said it didn't, that didn't matter specifically.
Okay. So should that, do you think that needs to be added
Revised,
for
it can be.
trustees from one of the 7 towns?
Actually, that whole topic is under discussion right now in various forms, so that information in general will have to be ascertained explicitly. It does look, however, that a town would need to be the trustee for the cooperative district, according to my reading of the RSAs, in contrast to what I suspected.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
One would seem not.
Right.
One would think not, anyway. But it's a whole separate subjects being investigated in parallel with respect to some other concerns. Anything else? Any corrections on October 28th? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? There has been no amendments.
So moved.
Moved by Paul,
Second?
seconded by Sue. Okay. Is all in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain.
Okay, 5 yes, 1 abstention, that being Hebron, and Bristol is excused. Okay, moving on to item 7, which has to do with other minutes in the packet. You have the RSA 195 committee meeting minutes for October 15th, and you have the policy committee minutes.
But,
No, you don't.
Yeah, I think it's budget committee and not policy committee.
Okay, budget.
Yeah. Guess we need to correct that on the agenda, that's right. Those were budget committee minutes. Okay, that's for your information. Is there any comment on those at this point?
misspelled name on the first page, but They're done, right?
No, these have to still go back to budget committee. They haven't been approved by them.
Oh, no, I was talking about the RSA.
Oh.
Yeah, well, hopefully that's behind us.
Yeah.
Okay, I would just like to insert at this point under Section 8, Correspondence and Reports, just a comment. On Wednesday evening in this room, the Honor Society will be inducting, the National Honor Society will be inducting 5 or 6 new members here. I have their names. I'd like to share that with you publicly. Unfortunately, we will have a previous engagement as a board in working with the teachers that evening, so no one from the board, to my knowledge, will be able to attend. But we would like to extend our congratulations to the following individuals. Jesse Austin, who's in the class of 2015, Benjamin Learned from the class of 2015, Haley McCaffrey, class of 2015, and Carolyn Miller from the class of 2015. And also Tara Palladino from the class of 2014, who will be inducted again on Wednesday evening here at that ceremony. The other announcement I wanted to make is to extend our congratulations to Mr. Earl Mills, who's been a teacher here for years and years and years, and continues to be. And he will be inducted into the New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association Hall of Fame in Concord on Sunday, the 17th of November. I think that's at the Grapponi Center around noon. So for those of you who want to attend. And following that, there will be a reception here in the library hosted by Peter Coffrin, our athletic director, starting at about 5 p.m., running till 7. So the public is invited to attend. So congratulations certainly to Mr. Mills. We are now at item 8, which is the principals and special education report. Are there any comments?
Yes, on the high school report, it was on the high school newsletter. Beth is leaving, or has Beth left?
Beth has left.
Okay, 'cause I sent her an email and
Yes.
got rejected, and so that explains that, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so when did she go?
She left 2 weeks ago,
Oh.
a week ago. Friday was her last day.
Been here.
She had a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's she doing?
She moved to Washington, D.C.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
she's working for the, I believe it's the chief state school officers.
Oh.
Kind of going, promoting extended learning opportunities through states and doing training with states on how to do extended learning opportunities. It's a great opportunity.
Anyone else have any comments on any of the reports?
The Newfound Regional High School had several recognitions of student accomplishments. So those that get the email should take a look at that. And when we get into, I guess it's appropriate now, the special ed, you're showing 20 pre-K students. And is that that's of November 1st? Yes. So we've gone up 4 since October 1st? Because Mike is showing 16 as of October 1st.
And that number will likely grow because as the year goes on, when students turn 3, they become ours. So it's not a September 1 kind of date that kids enroll at the beginning of the year as they turn 3 over the year. So that number will always, it will be lowest in September and will always increase as the year goes on.
Okay. So it has increased 4 since
And they don't leave
October.
until the following
Yeah,
year when they're ready
until-
for kindergarten.
graduate into kindergarten.
Yeah.
And thank you for including these numbers now. One of the things that we would like to do is to just use the baseline number for the October 1st report to the state on the report, just as a kind of a total reference, the total number of students as of October 1st. And then as the year progresses, with whatever changes occur against the then current student enrollment, you can show us the percentage.
I guess more of a question on the out-of-district students. You're showing 12. Would it be useful for us to know how many there were last year for the same month or not? Because that's a big expense, right?
It can be. Some are more expensive than others. I could try to track that down for last year. I could keep it, it would be much easier for me to keep track going forward. I'll include it every month on my report,
Okay.
what it is going forward.
What it's changed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for data collection, or for accuracy, moving forward is better than going backwards.
Okay.
And I can point out too, I put in that there were 25 students placed in non-public schools. That takes the tuition placements that Ann just mentioned, plus any that are in adult ed programs, BLACs, that aren't considered special educations. But I try to keep consistent with the same, your same monthly report as last year, to incorporate all students we're responsible for.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I actually have a question, if I may.
Yeah?
On my report, would it be helpful to put the identification rate? I think that sometimes what I would recommend doing is, if you'd like me to do that, to remove preschool, because 100% of preschool is identified, because we only accept special education students in it. So based on the numbers that I put in this month's data, our identification rate without preschool is 13.7%. If you add preschool in, it goes up to 15%. So I can certainly, if that's something that you'd like to track, I can add that to my report. But I would recommend, like I said, not including the preschool data in it, because it skews the number up.
Yeah, segregate it out.
Yeah. That, I just noticed I had that as a note too to ask you. I think that would be good.
I'm pleased to see that we're working on doing professional development for the paraprofessionals, so that the individuals that are helping the kids with the special needs will be better trained to do that. Okay, I guess we can move on to discussion items for consideration and action by the board. The first one being policies for first reading. Jeff, would you like to
Sure.
take over?
Actually, rather than taking policies for first reading, I'm going to jump down to policies for second reading because of the relationship. We have IKFC, awarding of diplomas, in for second reading. Further investigation brought forward that there were some pre-agreed exceptions. So we have created IKFC-A, which covers those exceptions where the student's IEP team made a determination prior to the 13-14 school year. And then that addendum will fall away, as it's very specific to that group.
So that'll be only for one school year then?
It's actually
Two.
Right. This was to cover students who that decision had already been made, and so they were not on a diploma track, a regular diploma track, and so we wanted to make sure we were meeting what was already promised to them.
Also for second reading, we have JJF, Student Activities Fund Management. It's in for a second reading.
JJS?
JJF, it's on the
The
back
very last
of
page.
IKFC.
Oh, sorry.
If we approve this tonight, policy IGDG, Student Activities Funds Management, will be removed, as they duplicate each other.
They duplicate or one supersedes?
I think they duplicate.
Yeah.
We had two policies with virtually the same language on them.
So why do we have them both?
I don't know, it was before my time. So this will fix that. We'll add the clause that we needed and just make one policy.
And we decided to retain JJF because where it falls in the policy manual makes more sense. It would be the area that people go to the policy manual to look for that type of policy. IGDG just didn't seem like the right place for it.
Okay.
So the second thing we're bringing in new is IHBG, Home Education Instruction. And on the second page, I believe it's a two-word change, where we have added the word academy into virtual learning charter school. And we have changed the Keystone School to Keystone Academy. And inserted the word districts. And it looks like exceptions in the paragraph. Mostly language and readability corrections. There's no questions on that. We'll move on to KBFA, use of students in non-school public information program.
I had a question to Stacy. Andy, it says that you'd be providing the approval. Is that micromanaging too much, that
This is
principals
on-
can't handle it?
This is on KBFA.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think it's, the plus of having, it's not a big, I mean, we get a couple, it's not a huge issue, but then we're consistent. So that I'm looking at them all, we're making sure that if something is going district-wide, we're being consistent on it. If something is going to just one school, we're consistent on it, that if it's outside, we make sure the language is on there that needs to be. It's a small task, I don't think it's micromanaged, I think it's ensuring that we're consistent.
Okay.
So basically what we did here is reorganize the policy and change some language. Get the school board out of the loop a little bit as far as having to review these types of things.
Yeah, because that was micromanaging.
Yeah,
Yeah.
real bad.
Why did you eliminate item F as an option?
Well, first of all, the school board can get involved at any time. The superintendent would have the option of bringing that to the board.
And I think our discussion was that the school board doesn't see them, so how could you have the right to refuse them if you don't actually approve them? Like, somebody always has the right to appeal to the school board.
And they had
But it
been-
seems silly to put it in a policy if the board doesn't see them at all.
They had been going to principals. And so the decision wasn't always the same about what could go home.
Right, I know, like, this came up with Phil last year. I'm just concerned about how that would be handled if it did have to come before the school board, because there is a policy in place that delegated to the superintendent, which is what this does. If we needed to trump it for some reason as a result of a request that came before us, that we would have to suspend this policy to do so.
We thought that putting it in there encouraged people to try to go above the superintendent and acknowledge that they can anyway. But we thought putting it in there implied that her decision wasn't really final.
Is there a general policy that anybody can appeal to the school board?
Like Phil said, anyone can appeal anything, anytime.
Yeah, I
So,
don't know that there's a specific policy that says that, but were we to be approached, it's just a logistics question on my part. If we were going to say, well, the superintendent's decision was final based on the policy,
Right.
and then because of an appeal,
But
would
it
we
doesn't-
technically have to suspend the policy?
It doesn't
to
say
do
that the superintendent's decision is final.
That's true,
It just says they won't be until they're approved by the superintendent.
yeah.
The superintendent can approve something at the direction of the school board.
Okay, I'm okay with it.
Okay. So then coming back to KI, public solicitation in schools. We carved this up pretty good.
This was a lot of discussion.
I had a question on no commercial solicitation. Is the for-profit schools, do they come into like these college fairs?
You mean like public, private colleges?
No. For-profit schools.
Like for-profit high
Like,
schools?
Phoenix, what's the one in DC? There's several for-profit universities
Yeah.
now. So would
Like if
they
we-
be
if-
called,
I couldn't tell you the names of the
Commercial.
colleges, but when I was here, I mean, they're all, the ones that show up, like, that we do a college fair, like, we had like 20-something colleges, they're all our very local colleges. Kind of the New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, they're all very local. I can't tell you that they do or don't. But it's typically like UNH, Plymouth State.
is Granite State a for-profit?
No,
I don't think they are.
they're part of the state
Well, the kid just
system.
out there all for profit.
That was my
So,
thought.
yeah, well, Southern New Hampshire used to be the only nonprofit in our state.
As far as IRS.
But they've changed to nonprofit.
That was the only
Yeah.
type of commercial organization that I thought, might be coming that would normally be
Yeah.
allowed.
And this was a policy we decided, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was kind of like the reasonable person standard, because we do have groups that come in. We have the yearbook sales, you have class ring sales, but you can't prohibit all those people. Because they're traditional things that we do as a school. And so we tried to make it so that it was a format that gave us some flexibility, but also you do have those enterprises that come in, because somebody's gonna sell a class ring to a kid. So, I mean, yearbook has to be produced by somebody, and they're not likely nonprofits.
And in each of those cases, we discussed the fact that the superintendent would be aware
Yeah.
that yearbook sales, ring sales, student pictures, all of these things were approved and going on.
Okay.
Most likely 30 days in advance anyway.
Yep.
So,
Well, we also talked about the fact that some of those things happen every year, and we didn't want to tie people's hands on
Got it.
that.
Okay, I guess that covers everything in terms of 9A, B, and C, the way we structured it. As we take action, we still have the sequence right, Jeff, right?
Excuse me?
As we take action, the sequence is still right.
Yeah, just for explanation purposes,
Okay.
it was easier to move them around a little bit.
Okay, no further discussion on policies, then we'll move on to 9D, which is retirement notifications and acceptance.
I'm gonna send around, this is what I'm gonna try to do is provide you these things in writings for staffing, so that one, we can track them better at the SAU office, but also so that you have something in writing. So we have received 6 retirement letters from professional staff. I have a few from support staff, but the board doesn't approve those, so I'm bringing forward the retirement of Karen Downing, who's a 5th grade teacher at New Hampton Community School, Theo Denoncourt, who is a special ed teacher at Bridgewater Hebron, Earl Mills, who's a science teacher here at the high school, Faye Lamani, who's a English teacher here at the high school, Chantel Lewis, who is a foreign language teacher here at the high school, and Linda Shanley, who is the nurse at the middle school. So also included, I attached whether they were eligible for stipend and what that retirement stipend was, so that you would have that information. So when the appropriate time comes, I would be looking for a motion to approve their retirements effective the end of the year.
Question, Jeff, did the retirement question come up in policy yet?
Yes, we did discuss it somewhat. And Stacy, you wanna?
Yeah, so so one of the big question was, what is our process? And so we felt after we reviewed what our process is, which is that at the next board meeting after the November 1st, we bring them to the board and you accept them. So we didn't feel we needed to policy it because of the fact that you accept it. And in order for it to be revoked by that teacher, they would have to come back before the board. And so, I mean, you would have accepted their retirement already. If it was later in the year, so looking at practice of how you, if you did this accepted them in April, then that might be when you wanted to policy it, only because then there would be that question of, they handed it to me, but it didn't go to the board. If the board accepts those resignations tonight, they're done. We're not giving them a contract. So the only way to do that would be that for them to basically ask the board to revoke their resignation. So it's a little more formal process that way. So I
Well-
think your process is already established.
All right, well, then the concern was the impact on budgeting,
Yep.
so,
There's
that's
a lot of
right.
experience here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed that.
I think by accepting them at this point, we can cement the budgeting.
Okay, any further comments?
So we're working 70 hours grand.
I'm curious, will Mr. Mills have been the longest tenured teacher? Probably.
I can tell you.
I would
just if
bet,
you're-
since we've only been around.
Linda Shanley is 25 years.
I know he's been here longer.
Karen Downing is 29 years.
Wow.
Theo is 20 years. Earl Mills is 44 years.
44, wow. District's only
is-
50 years old, so.
Faye is 13 years. Chantel Lewis, I didn't calculate it because she's 13 years.
Mike, how is this being paid? Is it paid out of like contingency funds or is it a budgeted item?
Interestingly, this is paid out of, we've budgeted for this in the 2015 budget. So it's one of those items that you've seen adjusted through the process since we gave our first recommendation. I think we started out with 33,000 and I think this is closer to 64,000 or so. In that ballpark.
Okay, well, these individuals will certainly be missed, having given us that level of service over the years.
I'll say we didn't budget exactly for the 64% of turnover. Some of the new hiring is going to cover it too, so, yeah.
Any further discussion? Okay, at this point, we'll move on to item 9E, and I have invited Fran Wendelbo, Chair of the Budget Committee, to speak with us about the tax cap. This evening to remind us all about how it works and to just discuss it in public, to give people a reminder that we are the only district in the state that is operating under a tax cap as a cooperative and independent district. And at this point, I'd just like to turn it over to Fran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for coming.
Anytime. Do I need to be at the microphone, or am I loud enough? Good, great. As you know, the voters decided to put in a budget cap, and things were going along smoothly until we hit the snag of having a surplus amount that reduced what we actually spent. We had to get emergency legislation passed, one-year legislation, House Bill 101, which solved that problem. What in essence it had done, because of the prior year, when we did the budget, we didn't know that there was going to end up being a $700,000 surplus. So then when that $700,000 was returned to the taxpayers, as it should have been, we realized that the law says it's against what your actual amount spent was, not what you budgeted, but what you spent. So since we didn't spend that $700,000, we would have had to reduce the next year's budget by another $700,000. So we got a legislative solution to that, and then later in the year they introduced another piece of legislation, Senate Bill 2, which made it a permanent fix. The first one, House Bill 101, was only specific to the Newfound School District, since we were the only one that it impacted. We were able to get it introduced and passed and signed by the governor and effective into law in one day, which is probably legislatively, historically, never done before. So it really was truly amazing. So we are under the parameters of that. Now, Mike, have you heard from DRA yet what they've determined that number to be?
I have heard from them, and they've given their local assessment. So that came in a week and a half ago, which we just passed out a handout showing what that assessment is. And you can see there the 2014 assessment, less state education tax and the equitable education grant.
This is the handout that just went around.
Thank you.
Make it.
Yeah, I gave him mine.
Which made the 2014 assessment $12,124,954. According to the tax cap, can exceed 2% of the FY14 assessment, which would make the tax capped levy at $12,367,453. So that's the capped levy going forward for 2015. On the same sheet, we show a estimation of the local assessment.
So the cap number, Mike, is $242,499.
So the actual capped budget would then look at the remaining revenue sources.
Right, but the capped assessment is $242,499.
If the tax levy is capped at exactly what you just said.
Okay, $242,499. Thank you.
And then we estimated the remaining revenue sources, which make up your budget, to give you really a tax cap budget. I show a comparison of the budget that's proposed, and you'll see shortly this evening, and the remaining.
Okay. The law defines that the budget committee cannot recommend a budget that exceeds that number. And that number is impacted by other revenues. If other revenues go down, we can't pick up the slack because we're capped at the local tax effort. So the only way we can pick up the slack is by to reduce spending underneath the local tax rate. For example, if the state funds are reduced, we have to make up the difference because we can't go what the state does, they increase it, it doesn't help us. If they decrease it, it hurts us. So, you know, and those are the realities, and I think that we're gonna have some tough choices to make because there have been some changes at last we spoke of the numbers. So the budget committee has to live within that tax cap number.
And that being,
You have, right now, you have leeway of $580,000. So the budget we're presenting
Mhm.
is $580,000 below the cap.
Okay. And out of that, and that's your best estimation on what the state aid is gonna be?
Yes, we looked at, as you can see there, that left column from state aid,
Mhm.
adequacy aid, catastrophic aid, Medicaid. We should see some improvement in our Medicaid revenue and catastrophic aid. We have a slight decline in the adequacy aid, which we've talked about. They're adjusting that. There's, I didn't do a comparison for the prior year, but just those two alone, along with, if you look actually at the local taxes, the assessment, and compare them with the prior year, they adjusted for about $120,000 worth of loss in 2014 of adequacy aid. So when they did that, they actually increased the local tax assessment. So you're receiving that same benefit going forward plus the 2% just in the tax levy. So that alone is helping us out right there. Plus, I would say Medicaid and catastrophic aid. I know a lot of districts who are in these cap situations, they're now paying a lot more attention to those revenue figures, looking at tuition possibilities, lowering some of their fixed costs, things like that. So those are things we've looked at in creating a budget which is, for all intents and purposes, nearly level funded. But we have not, this does not include, which we'll discuss this evening, wage increases and items like that.
And where does the amount appear that we had in the surplus that was taken under the new legislation as a carry forward?
I don't include that in this budget because that's considered equity or fund balance.
Mhm.
So that fund balance stays where it is. The board can request to use that fund balance as needed, and there's certain rules for that, and you'd have to vote for it. But that, I don't include that as that's not a revenue source for 2015.
However, on the spending side, my understanding is, unless you changed this the last time we talked, that there were a number of contingencies that were in prior budgets that are not in this budget figure.
Absolutely.
So that has continued?
Correct.
Okay. So that is what freed up a little bit of this remaining
Absolutely.
$580,000.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, Frank. The other thing to note is we did include in here the transfer from the Facilities Maintenance Trust. That is something the board still needs to decide on, and if the board chooses not to use that, I think there's 120,000 in that. If the board decides not to use that 110,000 to offset the oil tanks, the work on that, the replacement and work on the oil tanks, then this number would change based on that 110,000.
It would go down by that
Right.
amount. Right. So what we have to live within then is exactly what you have projected as your budget, and there's that $580,000 leeway unless there's some.
That does, the 580,000 does not include the fund balance.
Correct.
So those contingencies, we would say, and the reason why we did not budget for them is because you do have that fund balance there.
I'm talking about the 120,000. If they chose not to
Yes.
use
Oh, right.
the special funds, that would lower that.
Yes.
So out of that 580, that fund would have to come out of that if it was not voted to be used.
Correct.
And any teachers' raises or
Correct.
salary adjustments would have to come out of that.
That's right.
Okay. And that is what we're charged with. Now, this does not mean that you have to spend it. If the school board decided that they didn't need to use that 580, then you could come in with a budget that is less. We just can't come in with a budget
That's more.
that's more,
Right. Yeah.
to that deliberative session.
Yeah.
the budget committee can't come in with a number that's more.
Correct. But you are not limited by that. You could come in with more or less, but then we'd have to decide where we were going to cut it. And I would assume the school board would want us not to be cutting what you had recommended if we had to make a cut. We'd rather, at least I would rather, I won't speak for the budget committee, but we would rather have some guidance from the school board living within those numbers of where you would want to see it spent versus where we would have to end up determining where it would be spent to live within the number that we are legally required to come in with.
Do you actually determine where it's spent or just what the dollar value is?
You have great flexibility to make changes, so really, we can make changes, but the school board always has the authority to transfer things around after the fact.
With the one notable exception this year, that being the fund balance
Correct.
under RSA 198, right?
Because that's not in your regular operating budget. For example, when it looked like you were going to have a relatively healthy fund balance, the board made the decision to do some upgrades in security. So you took money that had been budgeted in other areas that was not going to be spent and decided to use it there. So you always have the after the effect that you can make changes.
Right. The balancing effect of this year is that we chose not to do contingencies to the degree we had in the past because we have a fund balance of $350,000. And the other counterbalance there is that we can't just decide what to do with that money without permission being granted by the budget committee if we want to use it, and then being presented to the Commissioner of Education to actually issue the permission. That's my current understanding of how that law will work. So there's some extraordinary control over it, unlike it's been in the past where the school board could arbitrarily move money around and have unfettered access to whatever fund.
And I just caution you that that is always subject to an interpretation of legislative intent and of DRA, the Department of Revenue Administration's interpretation. That's how we were impacted with the tax cap.
Right.
We didn't see that interpretation coming. And when it came, it caught us by surprise. And anytime you have a new piece of legislation passed until it's been tested, and this particular new legislation with the fund balance hasn't been tested yet, so we might be a guinea pig again.
Right, right. Well, one of the things I wanted to correct was the original understanding was that a public hearing would be required for the school board to be enabled to utilize those funds. It turns out it's not that way.
Right.
It's under RSA 32, so.
The only thing I can think of that started that misunderstanding is that it was something that would have to be discussed by the board, and since the board meetings are public meetings, it's not technically a public hearing in the sense that a special meeting is called, but it would have had to have been discussed in a public meeting. So maybe that's where the misunderstanding might have.
Well, actually,
That's that interpretation word again.
Yeah, I have recollection clearly that it was stated to us that we would have to hold a public hearing in order to spend the money. So, and having spoken in favor of the Article 4 last year to pass this and stating that on the basis of that understanding, I have since been corrected by checking on that. So. Does anyone have any questions of Fran, anything further on this topic? I think it's always important to review it because we're in the throes of learning more and more about it each year and the impact that it has on us.
Bless you. Oh, great.
So, just a clarification on the revenue side, Mike. These numbers are now based on what information, I guess, is probably the best way to ask that question.
On my computer, I have more of the specifics, which we're gonna use for the data task force stuff. But state aid, which is the state education tax, it's looking at this year's state tax adjusted by about 2%, looking at the historic levels and understanding that adequacy aid is probably gonna be hit a little bit too. So that is slightly below what you received in state education tax, which you can see right above, I believe, 4,184,000 for 2014. Adequacy aid is based on the new formula they have, which was adjusted for 2014, and it was also adjusted by a 3% reduction in our student population. Taking into account the new calculation that they're giving, so basically I took the 2014 calculation, utilized a estimated adjustment going into the 2015 budget, which is similar to what they did for the actual 2014 adequacy aid. And then I put a 3% reducer in there for a change in population, which has been historically a 3% reduction. I also talked to them, I forget the name of the person I talked to, at the DOE about that, as they're getting these calculations put together, and asked them if that was a fair number. Because I did not want to incorporate an adjustment that they did not plan on having. So they said in order to lessen the blow of the new calculation, that they're going to continue that adjustment. So I believe, and I have their blessing to some degree, that that is a pretty fair number. And that's one of the big numbers in this mix. Catastrophic aid, Danica and Ann, I worked with them on both catastrophic aid and Medicaid distributions. We looked at the students coming up that would be receiving that kind of aid for everything from their transportation costs, et cetera. That's how we predicted those numbers. Catastrophic aid, again, we're a little bit conservative, conservative on that, looking at what we would expect to get, and then multiply it by a 60% factor.
Which is what we've been receiving.
Which is about what we've been receiving, yes. And that's how we got that number. The rest are pretty much dunk shots as far as predicting, because that's what we should get. The facilities transfer, if you vote, that's the transfer to cover the oil tanks. You can actually vote to do a partial transfer. You can say, well, the budget can incorporate half of that, and we're only going to transfer, $60,000. The voc ed transportation, historically we've gotten at least 5,000, which I think is the number here. I would like to see that picked up. I think we can improve that due to some better reporting to more like $10,000. Student activity, gate receipts, and so on. Just looking at the history of it's between $2,800 and $5,000. $3,000 is a good estimate for the last three. National Forestry, we typically get $3,000.
What is that for?
It has to do, I think, with, and my good friend Leah over here might know more about that, because we did not get this in Dover, and I know we have trees in Dover, but it has to do with, I think, your portion of forest in this area. Is that correct, Leah? Or is that a Karen question?
It is a Karen question.
All right, sorry for putting you on the spot. But I can tell that you get it, and that's about the dollar amount now for history.
So we should plant more trees, is that the
Yeah.
message?
I don't know. 'Cause
Or forests.
It's national forest, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if for that kind of money.
The point being, though, that the revenues end up having a net positive effect on additional monies available to us, and they are reasonably estimated and
Yeah.
conservatively so.
Exactly.
So that 580,000 could actually be a pretty good number.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It could be 200,000 more than that. If we collected more than 60% of what we'd expect to be eligible for Medicaid reporting. And when it comes to this, these are really important numbers. You definitely do not want to overestimate these, right? So if you, especially with a cap, because there's nowhere to go. I'd rather have funds left over. If you can retain those, that's better, or give it back to the taxpayer.
Right, and when you look at the retained fund balance, in addition, we're just under $1 million.
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make one point.
certainly.
As Mike just mentioned about the reduction in reimbursement on the state foundation aid because of the 3% reduction in enrollment, I just want to point out that we actually lose money when enrollment goes down.
Right.
And unless there is some way of offsetting the money we lose in reductions because those students aren't here for us to get that money, that's going to be a continuing problem as the revenue declines with the enrollment. So at some point, you have to make an adjustment in spending, staffing, whatever, to counterbalance that loss of state revenue.
Yes, understood. That's why I have often talked about the statewide decline in student population and how that's affecting everyone. So. Okay, well, I guess,
You're done with me, I will leave.
I guess we're good. Thank you
See you
very
on
much, Fran, for coming, helping us out with that tonight.
Budget committee meeting on Thursday.
Thursday night, yes ma'am.
Little plug-in.
Well, thank you. Now I'm on to visit my husband at Golden View.
Somebody you're leaving?
Thanks a lot for coming.
What can I say?
Okay, we're now moving on to item 9F. Oh, hey, Fran? I had a copy of what we're going to talk about next for you,
Oh, thank you.
which you might find useful in advance of the,
Is the data?
yeah, the BTF current printout
Great.
for your review.
Bedside reading tonight.
It'll work. So at this point, I'd like to have you reference your color printouts that you have before you. This is actually version 7. Version 6 is out on the website. There have been a couple of changes made to version 7. They are at present just cosmetic. For example, we changed some titling. Instead of just the year, it now shows the fiscal year in the above columns. On line 2, if you look at those itty-bitty numbers way off to the left, I'm referring across line 2. Those are FY numbers, fiscal year numbers. We changed what was projected in the second column, which is all gray numbered background, to budgeted information. And that would be right up at the top in the second column. It says budgeted, not projected. And there were some other more compliance-related changes. We changed the definition, or rather the abbreviation for student and totals, for example, some minor stuff. Yes, it's true that in October we have to report this information to the Department of Education, and it becomes readily available about this time of year. But it's a bit of a task to go through all 100 and oh gosh, there's 199 plus lines. It goes up to 221, if you will. And a lot of this is available on the New Hampshire Department of Education website. Some of it is not. For that reason, it's a live document. It will be updated on an ongoing basis as the information becomes available. And as the changes occur, we will make them. So at present, we're looking at what has been up there with just these cosmetic changes, comparing Newfound to our cohort districts, which are comprised of Farmington, Hillsborough, Deering, Interlakes, Messinic, White Mountain, and Winnisquam across the top. Those districts were chosen just because of similarities with respect to size in terms of number of students, the number of faculty, and number of buildings, as best we could. It was winnowed down from 16 total choices, Newfound being one of the 16. And these are the choices that we chose to compare in our special ed study, which is how they came about to be reduced to the data task force number. So rather than this spreadsheet being wider still to the right, if you will, in terms of a screen that would make it almost impossible and very, very tedious to use and review, that was one of the reasons the data task force recommended that we winnow it down to a manageable number of districts.
And where are the number of students on here?
Should be right at the top on line 4, total student
Oh,
count.
okay. I was looking
Yeah.
at all the colors.
Yeah, I know, you're looking for colors, right. That, again, last year was 1259, so if you want to compare ourselves to what's current this year, you have to wait a little bit until